Welcome to the Unravelling Shaltazar podcast. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hello, Mark.
How are you today?
I am okay. I'm going to give you an okay because a full moon yesterday, and of course, you know, that is the most trivial question. It's so interesting because I often think there's so many people that you ask how are you, say, oh, great, fine, but you know, are you really getting the answer? So I try to be truthful. I'm going to go with okay today. Yeah,
I'm right there with you. It's been some interesting energy the past few days. So it's an uninspiring sort of energy, I would have to call it, if I could put a finger on it. Right?
Absolutely. And before we got on, this episode, which by the way is episode 22 of Unraveling Shaltazar, and of course I love numerology, and 22 is double 11. It's kind of interesting because what we were talking about is how there seems to be this lull that is encouraging us to make some changes in our life, and so accepting the energy that we have, and it's kind of interesting because the message you chose today in there is that line where Shaltazar repeats to try and love that which you do not like. Mm-hmm. And so we are going to be talking about the deeper meaning of love, I believe is the name of the message. Right. And it is very appropriate because neither of us are really kind of liking the energy that we're in. Mm-hmm. And Shaltazar in this message is asking us to learn to love it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. That was one of the lines I highlighted. We've been telling you that it is time to learn to love the parts of you that you do not like. And I mean, immediately the first thing you think of is, I don't like my teeth, or I don't like my legs, or, geez, I wish I had some hair, that, I don't think that's what they're talking about. They're talking about your energetic body, or your energetic parts, I believe. Because this whole message kind of circles around vibration and vibratory energy, right? So, we were just talking about, this feeling that, there must be something more, right? That we're not, you have these highs and these lows, you reach these peaks where you feel like, you're vibrating at a very high rate, and you can almost sense that source energy flowing through you, and then you're using it and sending it back out, and it's this wonderful experience. And then there's times when you're just like you're almost depleted, and you don't sense that energy coming into you, and you don't really feel like you have anything within you to give back, and so it's that that teeter-totter of energy that is really hard to to understand and to work with, I think.
Right. And one of the big insights that I got from this message is when they talk about the fact that love is not static, it's dynamic. So the ability to love that lower and slower, the ability to love that uninspired energy, that full moon energy that we're going through, is far more limited than when you're connecting with source, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that for me is an important takeaway, that love is very dynamic. And they talk about it being a word, but it's so much more than a word. And even us discussing love is sort of making this very much a left brain exercise. Mm-hmm. And this message is anything but that. This message is really saying that this is very much a feeling thing, that love is not the word. And I kind of love how they brought the analogy of us as a human being. And they said that your name is just a label, but there is so much more to you than that label. And love is just the name, and there's so much more to love than just the name love. and they sort of go on for a little bit about who we are being so much more than our name. And it reminds me of the old iceberg analogy of what is above the water is a small part of the iceberg, and there's so much more below the surface. And so they really kind of shook up my concept of love, even as I listened to it, and I listened to it about a week or so ago. It was difficult because I was listening to it from that perspective of we have to discuss it, and I couldn't really feel the love or feel the message the way I know they want us to. So it's a message that you really want to feel into and listen. And it's a bit mystical and esoteric because most of us really think of love as that definition that we have.
Yeah. Well, and it says in here that what is love? It's something that if you try to explain to somebody, like if you're going to explain to a child, what is love, you can give examples of loving behavior, but you can't really put your finger on what love is. And I sense that that's because, many mystics have said, that love and God are the same thing, right? So it's just a pure energy that, how do you explain that? How do you describe that? You can't see it. You can't really touch it. You can only feel it. You can sense it. I was telling you that, the story of my weekend, before we started today. I was down at the university where my daughter goes to school for her graduation, and I was describing to you how it felt there, and it just felt really good and positive and happy, and as you were talking about love, it just occurred to me that energy that was there was love. Everyone was sensing that love energy coming through them, and they were expressing it to others, and the people were giving each other flowers. There were hugs. There was clapping. There was congratulations. I mean, all of that. If you could put that in a bucket, you would call that love energy, I think.
Right.
And then you come back, to your routine life, and now you sense the absence of that feeling. That energy is no longer there because now you're back in your office or your home or whatever. And there's a letdown, right? You kind of come crashing back to earth because that feeling that you were sensing in this one place isn't here, and so there's definitely, there's definitely a vibrational and energetic component to it, I would think.
Right, but I think you're onto something really big with this, because I truly believe what Shaltazar is trying to tell us is that if we stop judging the less than pleasant feeling of coming home, that letdown after the weekend, if you could move to the place of acceptance. Shaltazar has said on many occasions that acceptance is the lower end of the continuum of love. And so I never really understood what they meant by the continuum of love, but in this message they're talking about it. If you could love your boring routine existence after coming home from a weekend celebrating your daughter's graduation, if you could accept that and not beat yourself up and not be wishing you had something else, then that's the lower end of the continuum of love. And I think that's really what they're trying to get across in this message, is you have to understand that there is this continuum of love. And just like your weekend away felt much more of the higher vibration of love, more of the joy and the bliss, and the routine coming home felt somewhat blah, they also talk about in this message the difference between source energy. For example, when someone has a near-death experience, and the unconditional love of source, and then they talk about love on planet Earth, which can nowhere come close to that unconditional love. So if we sort of look at it, they are talking about this continuum of love, and they're saying that your vibration, and they're even saying your dimensionality, has an impact on how you can experience that love. So they're saying the higher the dimensionality, the near-death experience, it's a much more profound love. The human experience, lower dimensionality, is a different love. The higher vibrational state, your weekend at your daughter's graduation, coming home to the routine on Monday, a lower vibration, those are examples of where we must understand the continuum of love.
Sure. So it's not love in the absence of love. It's love turned up to 10 or love turned down to 1, but it's all the same. It's all on the same dial. Just not you're just not experiencing the same level of it all the time.
Yes and no. Okay, I'm really going to confuse you here. That's what they're telling us, but I believe that a lot of humanity, and COVID is a perfect example of what's happened. A lot of humanity has gone to the absence of love. They've gone off the dial. They've turned it off because we're scared, we're fearful, there's infighting. And so in the duality of human life, we can go right off the scale and turn off the love. And I think what they're saying is that when you get into that disagreement with others, when you get into that fear, when you get into all of the things that the world is going through, the pain, the suffering, the death, all of that, you still can hang on to love. You still can be at the lower end of the continuum of that light and love. You do not have to choose darkness.
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I mean, I just think of situations where when you said turn the dial off or shut the love off. Relationships come to mind, right? A divorce, for example. It does seem to be a choice because the love was there at one point or at one time, and because of circumstances, whatever the circumstances might be, one person or both persons decide to turn the love off, to shut it off, and then it's then that vibrational connection does get severed, I guess, right?
Yes and no again. Okay, I'm really gonna. Okay, and this is kind of interesting because this is a perfect message to talk about the yes and no because that's what they're really saying. It's not definitive. There are marriages that split up where maybe the love is still there, but it's the compatibility and the coexistence, right? I mean, I've been coaching for a long time, and I've seen families that split up where there still is a love because there's the children to raise. And I've seen marriages where they choose to shut off the love and the fighting affects the children. So can you split up from your partner in marriage and still have a certain degree of love? That's where where Shaltazar would say, you got married because you were at the higher end of the continuum. You felt the bliss, you felt the connection, you felt the resonance. And maybe that mitigated a little bit, but you don't have to go to hating that ex-partner. You can still love that partner and choose to split up. And so, this whole thing of love is, I think we're not examining, we're not reflecting enough on the lower end of this continuum. And that's what I got from this message, is the fact that they're saying, be gentle with yourself. Instead of turning off that love, just realize that you're at the lower end. That it's a little bit fuzzy. It's a little bit not enjoyable, but it's still love. So, and I will say that in my life, as I'm starting to love that lower and slower energy, love that tunnel of darkness, okay? And Shaltazar makes it clear, to love is not necessarily to like. And that's important, right? So I can break up with my partner because I don't like her or him, okay? But I can still love him or her.
Right.
And so there's this big distinction. And I think we're onto something, because I think that when love diminishes, we think it's gone and the lights go out and we go to darkness. Shaltazar is encouraging us to say, no, that's not the case. You can be in that diminished state and still hang on to love, and you need to be gentle with yourself and realize that you are in that diminished state, you are in that lower and slower energy, so accept it from the place of love. Just like I believe, as you pointed out, in the higher realms, God is love. Well, God must love us when we're wallowing in self-pity, when we're feeling miserable, when things, when we make a mistake, right? I mean, a little bit contrary to some of the religious beliefs or doctrines, I don't believe that God is judgmental or is going to punish me for my wrongdoings. And if you can imagine God loves me even when I screw up, then why can't I love me even when I screw up?
Mm-hmm. That's the unconditionality of it, right? It's not conditioned on anything we do or anything we are. It's just always there. They say in here, Shaltazar says, we are simply surrender, simply be, simply allow, and the love will wash over you. We're beaming it to you and everyone on your planet every minute of every day. So they're saying that there's this rain shower of love that's pouring onto us, which I interpret as an energy. Just like I don't know how to describe this. Describe the science of this, but they say in here, love is an energy. Begin to think of love as an evolving force and an ever-changing energy. When we ask yourself to love yourself fully, and this is the part that kind of whenever I hear those, a meditation or somebody say, loving yourself or self-care, self-love, the first thing that comes to mind is, eat more chocolate or go get a pizza. You're loving yourself. Do something that makes you happy. What they're saying here is, when we ask you to love yourself fully, we're asking yourself to shift to the highest vibration you possibly can. So I'm imagining that this love energy that's beaming towards us, 24/7, in order for us to experience it, we have to raise our vibration to match the vibration of that energy for it to fully integrate with us. Otherwise, it's just hitting us like a fire hose and bouncing off of us and splashing all over the place, right?
Right. And that brings to mind Esther Hicks and Abraham, where they encourage us to move up the emotional ladder, so that the higher we move up in that ladder, the more available we are to the love. There is a line in there, I don't know if I can recall it, but they're basically saying that in order for you to receive the love, you must be able to have your receivers open, to be able to be open to it. And it also says that your vibration determines the amount of love that you can let in. Mm-hmm. So the point that keeps coming strong to me is the people that turn the dial off, to say it's so low, right? It's sort of like when you're listening to something, but it's so far away you can barely hear it. You say, I might as well turn it off because I'm not going to get anything out of it, right? So mm-hmm. If you're having difficulty on your smart device and your volume isn't working, and it's a bit of a whisper and you're kind of struggling to hear it, you shut it off. And I think that's what they're encouraging us not to do. Just allow the trickle to come through. Allow yourself to hear the whisper of love, because that's better than you turning it off. I'm getting a sense that what they're saying is it's our human choice as to whether we turn it off or not. If we choose to turn the dial off, then we can't get the love. If we leave the dial on, if we make the conscious choice to say, I feel miserable, but I am open to receiving love, then you have a better chance of moving up that emotional scale to be able to get back. If you turn it off, you're going to stay in that dark room until something shakes you and you turn it back on again, so that you're able to receive. I forget the words in there that they talk about, but they talk about the responsibility of the receptor is us. They can beam it to us, but if we're not going to be open to receiving it, there's nothing that they can do.
Yeah, it says we're beaming it to you and everyone on your planet every minute of every day, but you will not be able to connect to that love unless you become more receptive, more open, more vulnerable, and more available to invite it in.
That's it. Say that again. That's so powerful.
We are beaming it to you and everyone on your planet every minute of every day, but you will not be able to connect to that love unless you become more receptive, more open, more vulnerable, and more available to invite it in.
Right. So, I love that vulnerable, because when you're feeling miserable, you kind of hide under the blankets, right? Mm-hmm, right. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think that those four things, if we become more available, more vulnerable, then we're not turning off the dial completely. We're not shutting out that love, right? And I know, when you're not in a great place and your family and friends try to cheer you up, if you've turned the dial off, you're not going to hear it. You're not going to feel their love. But if you just leave the dial on a little bit, something they say may start to spark you and move you to the higher vibration. So again, I think that the most important part of this message is them telling us that love is not static, it's dynamic, it's not definitive, and it has this continuum, and we are capable of letting love in when we're feeling miserable, down, uninspired.
Great. Perfect. Perfect way to end our little session here. Looks like we've used up our time again. So
excellent. Thank you so much for choosing this message, especially with the energy that I'm going through and you're going through. Hopefully our discussion helps us realize that we have the option whether to shut that dial off, the love dial, or just to leave it open, and hopefully we will start getting more of that love from Source to bring us up. So thank you for choosing it. Thank you for doing these things with me. Love and light to everyone.
If you have any questions about the Master Teachings of Shaltazar, we invite you to submit them to Jeffrey@jeffreyeisen.com, and we will make your question the topic of a future episode.